Good evening, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome into another Big Man on Campus podcast. I'm your host, the Big Man on Campus. Usually we're live, but we're doing this recorded. So whether you're listening to us whenever, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. It's time to talk about the NFL draft. And one of the great times in the sports calendar is the NFL draft. The NFL is really a 24-hour, 365-day a year business. And the NFL draft is one of those points in the schedule where you start to look forward to spring, summer. Eventually, we'll have training camp and the season will be back. Many of you guys know I'm a big NFL guy, love college football, love doing draft stuff. And the time is here. So we got to do a preview. We got to get in some props. We're going to try to make some money. I've always done very well with props. We'll get into those. We'll get into all sorts of stuff risers, fallers, sleepers. We'll do our top 10. And I got a great guest tonight, a guy that I've known for a good amount of time. We kind of lost touch, but I'm glad he's back. He's from the NFL Draft Bible. He's got a great guide to making sure you have a great mock draft and do a great job picking those. His name is Joe Everett. Joe, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Glad to be back on. It's my favorite time of year, so it's a real privilege. I often tell people this is when the teams are built. That's why we got to pay attention because you look at the Pats. They drafted Isaiah Wynn. They drafted Sony Michel. That told the league we want to run the ball. And how'd that Super Bowl go again? I mean, this when decisions are made, man. I love this time of year.
Yeah, you can really find, diamonds in the rough. You can find guys that, some of the storylines are just terrific. Who's going to fall, who's going to rise. You have off the field problems. I will say, though, this year, Joe, and, it's funny, we start to have it kind of the week of. You start to see those old tweets resurface and things like that. But I got to say, there hasn't been a lot of off the field issues. There hasn't been a lot of character issues really either. And I found it interesting also, Joe, and I don't know if this was something, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on this. Over the years, we've had these NFL kind of interviews come up where they ask these questions and all this crazy stuff. It's been a kind of a subdued year for that. I haven't heard a lot of kind of off the field problems. Is that just kind of is this kind of a coincidence, or it's kind of been kind of nonchalant? We haven't heard a ton about any personnel problems.
Well, you might call it a calm before the storm, as so to speak. It's always on draft day that
True.
some of these crazy videos come out. If you remind anybody of Laramie Tunzel and the gas mask, and it's always something that seems to crop up night of. Or what was it last year? Josh Allen's tweets from back in high school days,
well,
out of nowhere.
You're starting to see him with Nick Bosa. We're starting to see Instagram likes and all sorts of stuff. I've always found that interesting, and I don't want to go off on a tangent right away. I just kind of wanted to get this out, but you're starting to see. I think there's going to be a day where I guess you just hire someone to, and I don't know if that's your assistant or who does that, but really just scrubbing every piece of social media that you have, because again, I mean, this is what they look for. But Joe, really excited to talk to you. I know you're one of the great draft guys out there. You do a lot of great scouting stuff, a lot of fantasy work. Just tell kind of people where they can find you and what exactly you do.
Oh, just a footballaholic, certified. Not in an institution yet, but I watched college ball. I watch a lot of college and just about every pro game I can, and squeeze in some high school when I get the chance. But it's the only sport I really care to watch. It's been like that since '06. Hasn't stopped since. I basically right now cover direct all our different analysts here at NFL Draft Bible. I'm coordinating our rankings, our big board, and our draft guide we put out. The bulk of that I just really tried to hammer through this year. During the football season too, I'm a fantasy football analyst for Insider Football. I'm their defensive statistician. So if you are out there playing fantasy football and you use the defensive players, IDP they call it. Well, I forecast the whole season. I project every week, every player what they'll do statistically, and then also do a little writing for bangthebook.com. It's a little gambling, throw some football picks out there. Try not and lose folks too much money, but just no off season for me, Jeff. That's kind of the way football is built today. It's just maybe we get a little taste in June, but it's pretty much a 365 grind.
Yeah, you have the NFL Draft Bible, which you kind of alluded to there, and I kind of liken it to, and I hate to bring up other people, but I kind of liken it to like one of the college football magazines you read or something like that. Really, kind of the leading authority on the NFL Draft. You have 1,000 players ranked, full 7-round mock draft, 400 scouting reports. You kind of also get into a little bit of next year's stuff. Listen, if you want to go out and win props, you want to go out and do things with the draft and kind of just overall grow your football knowledge. Look, I've talked about this before, time and time again. The time to make money in sports is the off season. That's when you learn these players. People have asked me before, how do you know so much about college basketball? Because I treat it like Joe treats whatever, whether it's college football or NFL. I'm always looking at stuff. And a lot of this stuff is you should be getting ready for college football now. Every piece and morsel of info you can grab is important. So make sure you head over to NFLDraftScout.com, get yourself a draft Bible, and also follow Joe on Twitter. You can follow him at Joe W. Everett, and I'll make sure I put that in the tweet that I tweet this out a few times. Joe, let's get into it. Let's start real quick with a top 10. We're going to get in, as I said, to some risers and fallers in the draft. And obviously the props. I'm a gambling entity. I talk gambling. I talk sports betting. I don't just talk about sports. I talk about the betting. I want to make money. And I've always liked props, and I'm interested in hearing some of yours. But I really just want to start with our top 10. And obviously we can't forecast trades. But I want to ask you, we'll start with the number one pick. Obviously, a lot of people believe it will be Kyler Murray. I agree. I don't think anyone won't agree, but I will say it wouldn't surprise me if they don't take Kyler Murray. I, for one, was a big Josh Rosen guy. Obviously, trading him will result in a cap hit of over $14 million. Giving up on him so quickly, you would hate to see him go somewhere else via the Cardinals and succeed. I think he's a kid that you really want under center, and I think he could be a long-term commodity in this league. But then I also look at the fact that I say, well, they have a new coach, and they were quick to get rid of Steve Wilkes. They have a guy in Kingsbury who this might be one of the only places with Kyler Murray where he probably will succeed. We all know what Kyler Murray's issues are. He's undersized. Really kind of the same issues we saw with Baker Mayfield. I'll first ask you this. If you were the Arizona Cardinals, who are you taking at number one?
Oh, if they put me in charge, I have my druthers. I'm taking Nick Bosa. Not looking back. I think that's what we
even if your coach is Cliff Kingsbury.
I'm bringing him in, hoping that he could fix Josh Rosen. That's what I had assumed when I saw the hire. It's like, well, wow, they're bringing in a quote unquote quarterback whisperer, and this is going to work with Josh Rosen, and now. Obviously, all this news. I mean, I'm seeing, reading the tea leaves. This is Kyler Murray is what it looks like. But I'm with you. Looking at last year's class, I hold Josh Rosen in pretty high regard, sure. And I would want to make this work by any means necessary. So I would try and keep him. Like I say, if I'm in charge, I say, all right, Joe, you're running this whole ship, whether it's in the ground or up on high water, it's going the way you go. Pick, and I would pick Bosa, but now I think by the time Thursday night the card goes in, it's going to be the Heisman Trophy winner. It's probably Kyler Murray.
I mean, you look at kind of the need for the Arizona Cardinals. We know what they have at quarterback. We know they have Rosen. We know they have a guy in David Johnson at running back. They still have some guys that can, receiver-wise, that's not a huge need. I'm sure it's something you can address. But you went out and got Christian Kirk last year. But you look at the pass rush for this football team. I mean, you actually have a pretty decent back end. I mean, your secondary is good. You look at your linebackers. You went out and got Jordan Hicks. Hassan Reddick out of Temple University. He was a big-time player right out of the gate. You have some guys right away. Joe Walker, another guy who we saw here in Philadelphia, he was a good backup. They have a real nice back end, but that group of four up front isn't great. You have a Terrell Suggs who is very old at this point. You kind of Chandler Jones that you like, but you need that other guy. And look, Nick Bosa would be the pick for me, but I think we can both agree it's probably going to be Kyler Murray. I want to go to the 49ers who, let me ask you, would you be surprised if they trade out here?
Oh, yeah. I think the 49ers and the Jets right in this top three are both trade candidates. And I don't know if there's a team that jumps the gun for a quarterback here. I think it would be for a Bosa or maybe that special pass rushing fit, but it's not looking likely. I just think that that's why they're picking Kyler Murray, man. They realize that he is there's a drop off after him, and they believe that's just such a special fit that they have to shift gears and everything. And once that happens, maybe there is a team that says, holy cow, Nick Bosa is now at 2. The 49ers, John Lynch wants to trade. He's shown a penchant for it. I think definitely the Niners have a high probability of not making that pick at 2.
What we'll do here is obviously we don't know what there are going to be with trades, and I'm going to make my picks here on what I see right now. The 49ers wouldn't pick again until the 36th pick. I think the two biggest needs for the San Francisco 49ers, who I got to tell you, I like. I'm a big Garoppolo guy. I really like John Lynch. I think from a personnel perspective, I think he's doing some good things. I think defensively, really, you add Dee Ford on one side. You have a Solomon Thomas. I think bringing in a Nick Bosa, that's a pretty damn good front line there. You look at the linebackers. Quan Alexander you brought in Malcolm Smith last year. I think safety could be an interest for them. But again, I think going out and getting that big play receiver, you're not going to take a receiver at 2. You got to go out and get Nick Bosa. It's a perfect pick. Make the pick, make it happen. Number 3, this is a pick that, again, could be traded as well. For me, though, I think it's got to be Josh Allen here for the New York Jets. We all know that this is a team that went out and added a Le'Veon Bell, went out and got C.J. Mosley. They obviously have a quarterback long-term and Sam Darnold. Maybe at some point you offensive line upgrade and you maybe do some other things. But this is a team right now to me, Joe, that I think needs that big-time special pass rusher. Josh Allen, I think, is that. I think 3, Josh Allen has to be the pick there.
I could see it being Josh Allen. I could still see it being Quinnen. I know they've got a lot of guys that are that type. Nate Shepard, Leonard Williams, what they're doing with McClendon. But Quinnen is just such a great player there. I think either way, you're getting a good player for Greg Williams' defense. So give him some more ammunition there. I've got no problem with either player right there. I think the only issues I have is people throwing Devin White there. It's like that's kind of the last thing they need. I've heard that fit, but I like, especially if it's Josh Allen, if they stick up with a stand-up pass rusher, then he's more that fit. But it depends to me, like what Greg Williams is going to do here with this version of the Jets. But I think either player there would be a godsend. They need more ammunition on that front 7.
I think if I'm going to pick a team, I think they'd be most likely to trade. They don't have another pick really for a while.
That trade with the Colts cost them last year.
Sure. No, 100%. And I think if you can go down and maybe get another pick, maybe late in the first round or early second, I think that'd be copacetic for them. It's funny because last year I lauded the Jets for their inability to have a decent roster, coming to the season. I mean, it was just pure trash. I mean, a lot of it. But credit to them for going out and obviously re-upping, getting some guys. They had that like Bilal Powell, Elijah McGuire running back group for a while, and just plug and play guys that weren't going to do anything. You go out and get obviously arguably the best running back in the league in Le'Veon Bell. You went out and got Jamison Crowder, who can shore up a young wide receiver core. The roster's starting to come together a little bit. I just think that third pick, whether it's a trade or not, if you pick at 3, you got to go Josh Allen. Number 4, Raiders. We know they have a ton of picks in the first round. Obviously, after that moronic Khalil Mack trade. We all know that was arguably one of the stupidest trades in the history of the NFL. The fourth pick, this is where I had Quinnen Williams. I think this is a team with, they're starting to field something interesting here. I think, it wouldn't surprise me if down the road they have so many picks. I think they will probably get a quarterback at some point. Is there a quarterback good enough to go 4? No. Quinnen Williams is still very raw, as we know. He's a good kid, though, on and off the field. The one thing I heard I have an issue with Quinnen Williams, and I'm real interested to hear your opinion. I know you're a big personnel guy. I think the only concern I have with Quinnen Williams is does he have issue maintaining his weight? He's quite small for a defensive tackle, no?
No, I mean, not that I had seen.
No?
No, I think that 303 combine weight was just so he could have a nice 4.83 40.
Sure.
I want to say he was.
You're going to guess it right now. He's not 3. He's probably 310, 315 at this point.
Yeah,
that's a good point, actually. I guess I didn't think of that. So, what do you think about this pick? You got to feel like Quinnen Williams. I mean, you look though. All of a sudden, I mean, I thought their draft last year, and I'm sure you'll agree. I thought it was a little questionable. I thought Colton Miller was a huge reach. We know Maurice Hurst had some heart problems. Arden Key was a bit of a discipline problem, kind of off the field. But if those guys can all kind of create into a good trifecta there, Hurst, Arden Key, throw Quinnen Williams in, all of a sudden you have a pretty good defensive line.
Yeah, I'm with you on Colton Miller. I did not like that pick. I thought that was just way too high to take him. But I did like PJ Hall, who they took. I think that and he panned out. And Maurice Hurst, what did they get him in the 5th round? That's pretty good value with that heart murmur he had, or some kind of heart condition going into last year. But looking at their roster, the cupboards aren't bare at DT. But you add Quinnen Williams to that, then that's with Hall, Hurst, and Williams. That's a flat out strength now. So I'm about. Some people say, oh well, they don't need, but like I would rather double up and commit to one area of the roster. So I think that's definitely where they need help, is the front 7 clear out. I would say they're definitely going to have to get an edge in one of those next picks, because Arden Key, he's all well and good, but behind him there is not much, and just flat out unproven. They need they need a real flamethrower to replace who they traded away, and it's boy, I just what they're going to do with these 3 picks, they really do rule this year's draft.
Yeah, and I mean, now is the time to cash in on the poor trade. You got to make this all work, because you went out and got rid of a guy that's arguably the best defensive player in the league, and you have to make this all work here. Obviously, I think they will target offense with the other picks, but let's move on to the top. They finish at the top 5. Only going to go through the top 10. Again, I'll post my full first round, and again, if you want Joe's first round NFL Draft Bible, NFLDraftScout.com, a great resource for all your NFL draft needs. Rounding out the top 5, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, look, you have a new coach, Bruce Arians, a guy that I've always been a big fan of when he was even back at Temple University. I really liked what he did. I just like his kind of liberal attitude and his ability to go out and kind of do the things. And he's a good coach. I mean, he brings in people that can coach, and you bring in a guy, Byron Leftwich, who's interesting. Todd Bowles back into that coordinator role, which I think is terrific for him. Am I out of line here to say that I think they have a pretty solid front 7? I really like what they have up front, outside of losing Quan Alexander, which I think they address with this pick. Pierre Paul's obviously a guy that could still play. Gerald McCoy's fantastic. Vea, one of those road graders. I thought Carl Nassib was an underrated signing. Bo Allen's a real road grader as well. You got to get that linebacker to replace Quan Alexander. Throw him in with Deion Buchanan. All of a sudden you have a big-time player and a big-time defense. Secondary is still a problem. One of the worst groups last year as far as secondaries. I mean, we regularly saw this group give up 30-plus points. Are you going to go with Devin White here? Because I am.
I'm going BPA. Levante David at this point might be a little overpaid. They brought Deion Buchanan in there as a player coach role. I am positive to help teach Bo's scheme. He's got that experience. His early days at the Cardinals. The problem with I see Pierre Paul and Gerald McCoy being gone, not so near future. I just the scheme fit there is going to be real. I mean, it's an odd front usually out of their base. I know they run both with what Bowles likes to do, but man, it's Pierre Paul running from New York to find a better fit. Oh, I'll go to the Buccaneers. Years running that even front, and now it's looking like it'll change, but. Regardless of what they do, I'm with you. That is one of my favorite coach. Living in Indianapolis and seeing what he did with Andrew Luck early in his career. No risk it, no biscuit, man. I wish we could have got him back here in Indy. I wish the timing was right, but it wasn't. And Tampa Bay, I think, is real lucky to get him. There's no doubt about it. But I think changing basically their identity on that side of the ball, you take the best defender available. So yeah, it's Devin, and that right there, I think he's my number 3 overall total player. That's just the freakish test numbers he's had. But even before that, you knew the instincts were there. You could see it on the field. That's man, I really think that's going to be the new identity. As impressive as last year's linebacker class was, I would probably have Devin White number 1 ahead of guys like Raquan Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, obviously Darius Leonard. I don't think anybody was expecting what he did. But sure. Point being, that was such a very epic. Heck, the Edmonds kid from the Buffalo drafted. I mean, right. That was a great class. But I would have White ranked above all those guys.
Yeah, that's high praise. I mean, you also look at the fact people have talked about his work ethic, very good, student of the game. He ran a 4.42, freakishly fast. Definitely fastest is in the linebacking group. I mean, this guy's 6 foot 237. You run a 4.42. Pretty impressive. I think he's an instant starter. I think he's a guy right away that really helps them. And, I think Tampa Bay is really interesting. I really do. Because you kind of wonder, where do they go offensively? And, they do lose a guy like Deshaun Jackson. And, what do you have with, a guy like Jameis Winston? Is he ever going to be, kind of the player that you thought and you think he can be? But they have some special players there, and defensively they're starting to kind of cross the field a little bit. Number 6, obviously the New York Giants are up next. This is a fascinating position, and this is a fascinating pick because we never know what this group's ever going to do. They're full of surprises. Last year, not really too full of a surprise. We kind of knew what they were going to do in taking Saquon Barkley, a pick that had to be made. But now you have a season where you lose Odell Beckham. We don't lose him. You trade him. You bring in Golden Tate, big deal. Eli Manning, for whatever reason, they just never want to seem to identify that Eli Manning is over the hill. You have to go quarterback here, don't you? I mean, seriously, Joe, you have to. I mean, Eli Manning, you got to get – if you're not going to, move on this year, you're going to have to move on real soon. And it's got to be Dwayne Haskins here, isn't it? Or some kind of quarterback? What are you doing here?
Well, I personally would wait till next year. I know Giants fans right now banging their heads against the wall listening to me talk. But I honestly believe if you don't believe it's your guy, then you got to wait till you feel that it's right. And this, to me, is just not the class. And this is what I was preaching when they took Barkley. And, praise be, Barkley is just some special running back. But what was their record? What's going to be their record next year? What would it be if they made a move to get Baker? What would it be if they took Darnold? I just don't know if the horizons wouldn't be a bit brighter. But be that as it may, just on the quarterback basis, comparing last year's class, this year's class, and then going into next year's, well, heck, if I've got to make a top 10 of all 3 classes put together, Kyler's the only one that makes the top 10.
Would you tank if you're the Giants? I mean, next year, you're going to have a huge and you make an interesting point, but I'll ask you 2 questions. First of all, you don't see tanking a lot in the NFL. Would you tank if you're the Giants? Second of all, if you don't take Haskins or a quarterback, who do you take here for the Giants?
I think it's such a special pass rushing group that that this is the move you make. You either take Sweat if you're confident on his heart murmur that's there. He said there's two players this year, Caleb McGarry, the offensive tackle for Washington, and then the Sweat from Mississippi State. Just freakish numbers as a test, and he's so long. I'm just watching him in practices at the Senior Bowl. He's standing tackles up off their feet just in drills. That kind of basketball length he's got is just so rare. I think they'll look past the medical. Someone's going to take a chance. I think he's got to be in the conversation.
Did you get Oliver?
I think above Ed Oliver, yeah, because like Sweat, he could be that special pass rusher. To me, it's between two guys. It's Burns or Sweat.
Yep.
Because those guys, especially in the new look defense they're going to have there, they really need another answer, I think, on the other side. So that's I'd either do that or, hey, if Ed Oliver's your flavor of coffee there, that's fine too. I think that this front seven group, the defensive linemen, especially these edge rushers, this group, this is where you take off the top of the cake. You get the real icing here, and then you let everybody else get the leftovers. And then next year, the top of that cake is going to be your quarterbacks, your running backs. It's a really nice running back class, but more than anything, the quarterbacks that could potentially be there, I think it's a few guys you could really consider as a passer that would be above. I'd have the Herbert kid, obviously Tua. I'm a fan of Fromm. Heck, I mean, there's a few passers that I'd like above Haskins is my point. So I'm just really leery how that kid moves in the pocket. You just watch anybody listening, watch his game against Purdue and tell me that that's a guy you feel is a cool customer in the pocket. Cause I really don't like the way he moves. I like him pre-snap. I think he breaks down coverages and protections. That's one of his fortes. He is super smart. But in today's league, man, there's a lot that happens out of structure. There's a lot that just you cannot predict, you cannot predetermine. And there's a reason why Carson Wentz was so successful in year two. There's a reason why Baker had himself a real nice start, because things broke down. And when they broke down, they showed what they could do out of structure. And I just don't see that element to Haskins. And that scares the life out of me, especially with an offensive line like the Giants.
Fascinating. A lot of picks for them. 18th pick as well. Also a pick in the second round at 37. So, plenty of picks for the Giants. It wouldn't surprise me. You're kind of the first person that I've really kind of talked in depth with about kind of skipping over, Dwayne Haskins. I think you're onto something, though. I think if it's not, quarterback that you take here, I definitely think. But if I've learned anything from the Giants, it seems like they always make the wrong decisions. We'll see, but definitely a fascinating decision here. One of the fascinating picks. Number 7, this is not, I don't think, a fascinating pick. I think this is, for me, when I first looked at the NFL draft back in March, this was a pick right away that I felt was pretty simple. Once they grabbed Nick Foles, it's got to be Jawan Taylor here. Jawan Taylor, 6'5", 312, big kid, strong kid. A lot of people have compared him to Vernon Carey, who, if you know Vernon Carey's son's actually a high-end college basketball player, is going to be playing at Duke next year. Many people have compared Jawan Taylor to his father. You have to agree, the road grader model here, he's not exactly some of the players we saw in a last year's group. I don't think this is a great offensive line group. Definitely not last year's, but this is a perfect pick for Nick Foles. You got to have some protection, and Jawan Taylor is probably that guy, right?
I'm accusing you of peeking at my mock draft that's about to come out, because I've got Jawan Taylor to the Jags. They're meeting with him. He's had the private there. They could really use another answer, and if they want to establish that running game, like they want to re-up in Fournette and put confidence in him, well, let's force the issue. And if a souped-up offensive line isn't getting it done, well, then maybe Leonard's not the answer. So they're going to figure out which part of this equation is not going to work, and I like the fit and the pick.
Yeah, I'll ask one thing. There are two things I want to bring up on Taylor. I think one thing we had to look at is obviously competition he faced. I know when they played Florida State, he was very good against Brian Burns, which very good competition he faced, obviously being in the SEC as well. Let me ask you though, I read that he coming into college, before they would offer him a scholarship, he had to lose weight. I think coming in, he was 380.
Yep.
He then
Yeah.
moved down, got into 347, signed his letter of intent. He comes into the draft at 312. You have to figure at this point he was just a young kid who maybe ate a little too much. You have to figure with this new lease on life and where he is with being in the NFL. You have to figure the weight stuff won't come back to hurt him, will it? Ever?
Oh no, not if he wants to make his second contract.
Sure.
I mean that and anymore that really has helped out. I think the league as a whole. It's you're getting a certain amount of slotted money as a first rounder, but making that fifth year accelerator and then getting to year two, I think it's a real destiny for these guys. So I think Taylor's going to do everything it takes to get there. The real worry there is he's another one of these. You hear the whispers around this time of year, Jeff. The medical on Taylor is that there's some kind of back or a knee issue. I've
Not
heard
good.
undisclosed. So if he does start slipping on draft day, that there might be the reason, because we're just not privy to all these doctors' reports. But there is something out there on Taylor, I guess, that might be getting teams scared. But still, I mean, what Peter King's mock came out this morning, he's got him at 7, I think, to the Jags. So I would say you are in good company, sir.
Would you consider, if it's not Taylor, would you go Cody Ford?
I like Ford, but at that point, I'd go to my next tackle and get Dillard. I think looking at their roster, they want it on the edge. They paid an awful lot of money to that Norwell. Remember, like in free agency last year. I think they're going to see what they can get out of Can, but they need that upgrade from Will Richardson and hope that Cam Robinson can stay healthy this year. That I think I'd go Dillard just because he's so proven a tackle. And I love the comments of like, oh, well, he's got all these pass sets, so he can't run block. It's like when you play for Mike Lee, Washington State, better than anybody. I mean, they're throwing 90% of the time. So it is what it is. It's a result of the plays called by the coach. But I have total confidence in Dillard. He already strikes me as a pro's pro talking to him. He's just such a student of the game. The guy's got his own film reel of Joe Thomas and Joe Staley, just watching them back to back, comparing his own pass sets to these guys. I think that, of anything, strikes me as just a self-motivated guy. I think Dillard, that I really think the world of him.
Yeah, but I think for me, it's definitely Taylor. I think he's a perfect pick for them at 7. Let's go to the Lions at number 8. Detroit, an interesting team. Obviously, a guy in Matthew Stafford who is a complete loser. I don't know why he's still. I've never been a fan of his. He's terrible against the spread as well from a betting perspective. Just really a guy that puts up a ton of numbers and really does little else. I think the big thing for this group is obviously another team really in need of a pass rusher. You look at obviously the teams up towards the top, and it comes as an interesting point that this year there are so many teams that need a pass rush. You look at offensively, I think they're they're going to be fine. They have plenty of playmakers. You bring in Danny Amendola, who look, I think has to worry a little bit more about off the field with some of his Instagram behavior lately, but. Kenny Galladay, obviously, he came to fruition. Marvin Jones, still a guy that can play. You have a tight end in Jesse James. You bring in. You look at defensively though. The pass rush is something I think they lack. You already have a good player in Snacks Harrison. You have a guy in Trey Flowers. Throwing a guy on that other end, got to be Brian Burns here, right?
That's exactly who I've got mocked again. So stealing picks, I may accuse you, but I like the fit. I like that defense too. They want the stand-up pass rusher, and that's, I think, more Burnsy's profile. I really believe he could play both, but from that 2-point stance, the athleticism he has, and if anyone's not familiar, just Brian Burns Combine on your video search. Enjoy. It's pretty phenomenal what that kid can do at his height and size.
Yeah, no, that's a great point by you. I know the Eagles went out and got Josh Sweat last year, who was at Florida State as well. But you look at Burns. I mean, really, 4.5, 340 for an edge rusher is. That's quite unbelievable. A lot of good comparisons. He led Florida State with 15 and a half tackles for loss, 10 stops or 10 sacks last year. In his career. This is a guy that really good player. I think he played basketball as well. I read when he was in high school. So definitely, I think a safe pick here, a player that they desperately need. They haven't had a guy like this in seemingly a long time. Number 9, the Buffalo Bills, and then we'll finish out with the Broncos at 10, and then we'll get in some risers, fallers, a sleeper or two, and a prop or two. We got the Bills next. Sean McDermott's club. We think they have their quarterback of the future. Obviously, McCoy at running back, very injury prone, but still can get the job done. Pretty good wide receiver core. Brought in Cole Beasley, a guy that can play the slot. Zay Jones and John Brown. You have to figure the Bills will address some of that stuff later. But another team that needs some defensive line help. I'm going to open this up to you, Joe, because I'm interested to hear your pick. I guess I'll give my pick first, but I'm interested in hearing yours. I think a need for them, again, is a pass rusher. I think a wide receiver would be terrific for them, but, again, not going to take a wide receiver this early with this group. I think do you go Ed Oliver here? What do you do here, Joe?
Ed Oliver would be tempting, but I think they invested a little bit last year. They really like what they got in Harrison Phillips. I think Kyle Williams leaving, Harrison Phillips entering, it's just so fitting. I mean, the mantle right there. But I'm looking at tight end, and this is a little bit BPA. TJ Hawkinson would be off the board if I'm just going straight off a list. This is one extremely talented because he's a traditional YN, and that's what makes him a fit in Brian Daboll's scheme. They want guys that they could line up in the 12, 22 type personnels where you've always got the 2 tight ends, sometimes even, the 23, bring them on the 3 in the jumbo package. But Hawkinson is a guy that you don't know what to expect when he's out there, especially just right off edge of the line. He could be running a route, or he's just going to dominate in the run game. The easy comparison is George Kittle, but I know you remember Heath Miller of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That I think that's the kind of player he is. Maybe not as dominant in the running game, but that's the ilk. I think just no weakness. Very clean player too, and really Tyler Croft, Jason Kroom. They picked up Jake Fisher, the old Oregon tackle, turn him into a tight end. I just good luck with that Frankenstein's monster. I think they need a real answer. And also another target for Josh Allen. I think really the big need is a field stretcher. I think I like Smoke Brown there as the deep threat, but somebody opposite him really hurting defenses. But there's not a receiver out there like that. So I think Hawkinson right here is a nice little fit for their offense, but more so you're taking the best player off the board and you're really making some other teams upset their draft room too.
I was put out some great tight ends over the years. Dallas Clark, George Kittle. You're going to put out Noah Fant as well. They've had some really good players from a tight end perspective there. And, you mentioned kind of the comparison to Heath Miller. That's a good one. I think scheme-wise, I think talent-wise, I think athlete-wise, it kind of reminds you of Kelsey a little bit, I think. A competitive kid, can block, can really do everything you need him to. And with the new tight end in this league, he can kind of do both. I think, for the Buffalo Bills, I think he'd be a fine pick. You slide him in. You have a decent group of receivers. I think this could be a real rapport being created between Josh Allen and Hawkinson here. I think it's a great pick. Number 10, the Denver Broncos. And, You got a team that has bottled the quarterback position more. I'd like to hear it. Just a complete mess of a decision-making process here for the John Elway-led Broncos. I mean, what a group of failures, from Brock Osweiler to Trevor Siemian to Paxton Lynch to Case Keenum, now Joe Flacco, who, look, Joe, you and I both know Joe Flacco is a stopgap kind of player. You must develop a long-term solution at quarterback. Again, is it this year, though? That's the big question. I got to tell you, Joe, I watched a lot of Drew Lock, obviously at Missouri. I think he was a terrific quarterback. Always liked what he did. You're definitely a guy that can, read the field, good arm, good size. He's, what is he, 6'4", actually really good size. You wonder, is he an accurate enough player? Does he have that touch? Is this a team where, with obviously issues at deciding and talent scouting here, do you wait till next year? And if so, what do you do here?
And you got to wonder how long John Elway is going to be there, like his association with the team. I've heard there's a plan in store, just that he's kind of ready to step down in the next 3 years. And does he want to make that 3 years, put his stamp on it, and take Drew Lock is the real question. But if I'm in charge, just like we talked about, I don't believe the guy. I will admit, though, and fess up, I've come around to Drew Lock. He's my number 2 quarterback. So if you're listening, Drew, it's okay. I'm coming around to your side of thinking, but I'm still saying I'd like to wait to next year and just take one of these 2 defensive linemen that are special. You've got Chubb on one side, you've got Von Miller on the other. What about Ed Oliver right up the middle? And Vic Fangio, the new defensive coordinator, has toys in the attic. I mean, this is just that I think that they'd look defensive line and then the backup plan outside of that. If you really like Devin Bush, the linebacker in Michigan, as a fit, that's a weakness in the Broncos defense. And I'm just like we said, reading the tea leaves. Chicago last year, to fit Fangio's defense, they took Raquan Smith, that souped up linebacker out of Georgia, in the top 10. Well, here it is, Broncos in the top 10, and they've got a couple of stiffs in the middle of that defense by the name of Todd Davis and Josie Jewell. All due respect, Josie, but I mean, pass pro is not his forte. Neither is for Todd. I think both those guys are 2 downers. Devin Bush would be a significant upgrade there. So I wouldn't be shocked. That'd be the kind of the random pick. But boy, if you're going like just trying to cut the upper crust off this class, I think it would be Ed Oliver or Rashawn Gary. And you really create a monster of a defense here and just establish things with your new head coach, which is, his forte.
Yeah, I think defensively they're really good. I mean, getting back to those years where they went to the Super Bowl, they had that shutdown defense. But you know what? Here's where I'm first going to disagree with you, Joe. I haven't disagreed with you much, but I'm going to disagree with you. Go out and get a quarterback. I'm sick of watching this team with all sorts of talent. You can win this division. You go out and make some things happen. Go out and get a quarterback. I think Drew Lock can be that player for them. I have them taking Drew Lock. I think he's a guy that can instantly come in and play for them. Willie, I don't know, but I went out and saw them make some moves last year. I will say this: I don't think offensive line. I don't think it's particularly good. Garrett Bowles I thought was kind of disappointing at times. You got to wonder some of these. Is this offensive line good enough? But Joe Flacco's a stopgap. Go out and get your player. Go out and get Drew Lock. Let him maybe learn for. Let me ask you, Joe, if they take Drew Lock, what would be the over under on when Drew Lock plays? Do you think you got to figure he'll see the season quickly?
Over under of me ripping my hair out being a quasi Broncos fan, it'd be 3 seconds. But no, I think he'd start relatively soon in that case.
Yeah, I agree.
And I like the fit because, Elway likes the more athletic type quarterbacks. And, people may not even realize it with Locke, but this is a guy who had basketball scholarships and Division I scholarships. I mean, he's a legit basketball player, and really, I think that's a contrary to Haskins. He moves well in the pocket, creates throwing lanes for himself. He just has that natural ability to do it. So I don't know if I'd be terribly frustrated as a Broncos supporter there if they took Locke. But I think to answer the question more appropriately, though, yeah, that would spell a pretty quick end to Joe Flacco's run in Mile High.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Joe, wanted to get into a couple risers, fallers. We obviously here after the combine, we hear some of these, stories. A guy like DK Metcalf, who you've just been all over social media with this freakish, body at this point. I mean, just a chiseled, looks like a Terrell Owens in his prime. You look at some of these risers and fallers. I'm going to give you a riser, a guy that I really like. A guy that I've seen play, a guy that I really enjoy. And I got to tell you, I might get some crap from this from you, but I wouldn't be surprised to admit that I think he's the second best corner in the draft. I really do. And I want you to hear me out. Rock Ya-Sin, I think he's terrific. I think this guy is moving up. I think he could be a fringe first-round pick. He's a guy that coming out of Southwest DeKalb High School, he was a wrestler, as you know. I think from a tackling perspective, I think a lot of people like him. I think he's the best tackling corner in the draft. And you look nowadays, a lot of these cornerbacks aren't wanting to tackle. They don't want to get involved. They don't want to put their head down. This is a guy, I think, with great pass instincts. I think he's terrific in coverage. He's not the fastest corner, but he's quite fast. I think he's got a lot of interesting technique. I like how the fact that he's long, good physique. I also will point out his character. And I know you probably know this at Temple. They have the single-digit number. And this is a guy that came over from Presbyterian FCS. He immediately got a single-digit number. You look at over the years, guys that wear the single digits turn out quite well. You look at a guy like Tyler Matakevich, players like that. I think Rock Ya-Sin is terrific. I really like what I'm seeing out of him, and I think he's a big-time riser. You think he can go in the first round?
I'd love to put him in the first round. I got the chance to interview him at the Senior Bowl, and you couldn't be more right about character. He's super serious. Every question was a yes, sir. And he's so well loved by his teammates. Raquel Armstead was at the event too, and man, Raquel would not leave him alone. Mr. Rock, he kept patronizing during the interview, but he befriended so many of his Temple teammates so fast because of the way he plays. I think he fits the Seattle style, Jacksonville, San Francisco. He's press man, because he's so tough and he's ready to tackle, just like you said. But I the teams that do a little more zone, maybe that won't be as much for him. Well, it's kind of limited in recovery, but the intangibles, the upside, there's a ton to like. I think he's in my top 100. I've got him as I think a priority day two, especially like I mentioned, if you're one of those teams that is real aggro on the press and plays that Seattle style ball, like the Chargers are playing it now with Gus Bradley over there. It's so popular. It's so funny, but that's the same defense from the late 80s. Pete Carroll was running. He ran that when he was Patriots coach, and now all of a sudden it's popular. It just go figure. Whatever works now, we're all going to do that and copycat.
Interesting, yeah, for sure. I think he's a guy that I really like. You look at guys that had good combines. A guy like Miles Boykin from Notre Dame. I know he had a good combine. Let me ask you, on while we're talking about receivers. Is DK Metcalf the real deal, or is he just a chiseled human being that everyone loves, and he's just kind of one of those, here's what I find with DK Metcalf. Maybe I'm wrong. I think he's terrific. I think he's probably the real deal. But I kind of, every time I see Metcalf, I think of, if you ever see that show Catfish on MTV, where like these like lonely guys in the Midwest find this really attractive woman that like is into them, and then it turns out that they're just like a guy or something. Does he come across that way where he might just be a little too good to be true? What do you think about Metcalf?
I think he's a Ken doll in a helmet.
Interesting.
No, he's a good player, and one thing I do love is the bloodlines. The game means something to him. When your uncle is Eric Metcalf, and then your dad's Terrence Metcalf, and then your grandfather played football for the 49. I mean, it's this a football family. He wants to stake his own claim and and make his own name. I respect that, but he runs about 3 routes right now. He's not as polished a player, I think, as his teammate AJ Brown.
Mm-hmm.
But the testing results, I think, I don't want to say unfairly or fairly, whatever, but he's getting graded twice on that combine performance, which, that's kind of unfair when it should just be about the tape. He's got some favorable games, though. I mean, he did great couple catches against Alabama that really helped set the tone for Ole Miss. But I worry so much. I talk about lasting images with some players, and everyone wants to say, "Oh, it was that post he made in Instagram. He's all buff." And no, my lasting image is it's the combine. No, my lasting image is him wearing that neck brace at the end of the season in a few games where he couldn't finish out the year. So I think that's going to kind of haunt the stock of the Kalen Metcalf. But there's upside through the roof. But I would say it that way. That's why he's my what I got him at 6 or 5. He's my 5th ranked receiver because right now, I mean, I'd rather wait on a guy like Deebo Samuel, who I know can run a bunch of routes and just bullies people with his feet, with his cuts, his break.
I actually, and I'm glad you said that because I actually had him as one of my favorite receivers in the draft. I loved what he did at South Carolina. I thought he was one of the most dynamic players in the country. But when I look at Metcalf, I had 4 things written down, and none were good. Footwork, drops too many passes, injuries, and I don't think his route running is particularly good. And I don't know what else. I mean, if you're a receiver, it's kind of a concern for, kind of that's everything you kind of need. So
you just like it to be more consistent. When people were saying, "Oh, he's the first wide receiver off the board," well, I don't feel good about it when I think there's more. Like I said, Deebo, AJ, I think Hollywood Brown, as far as a route runner, is more polished. I mean, everyone. That's the problem with this wide receiver class. There's a bunch of dudes with holes in this wide out core.
interesting. So do you think he goes first round? You think he will, right? Clearly,
I think it only takes one of the 32, and I think one team is going to bite on Metcalf, though. For better or for worse, they'll take the chance, and hey, it's tough to blame them. I mean, the upside through the roof. I will say the one biggest concern about him is I think look up his 3-cone time and look up Tom Brady's. My money's on Tom Brady having a better 3-cone.
You might be right. Let me ask you. I want to do a couple of sleepers here just quickly, but I have a quick question on Daniel Jones, and I'm going to get more into this when we get into the kind of some props that I like. I see a lot of people like over 3.5 quarterbacks taken. I heard, I guess it was somebody compared Daniel Jones. I forget who it was. I think it was Gil Brandt. I think he compared Daniel Jones to Peyton Manning, which I don't know. I see more Ryan Tannehill, but what do you think about Daniel Jones?
I kind of like that Tannehill comparison more. The only Peyton Manning similarities, they're both tall, white. They wore blue.
Yeah,
coached by Cutcliffe. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. There's no real other than that.
I'm sorry, Gil Brandt, but I don't see it either. I do think Daniel Jones one tough SOB. There's so many instances in his game to where he'll really stare down the gun barrel and deliver a shot. He'll live and die for his teammates, and that's definitely one thing I think is a leadership role. I like him from that aspect, but it's tough. I think though I believe it. There might just be the 4 quarterbacks. I'm definitely not going to be stomping on an under there just yet. Like I always say, it only takes one. Wouldn't be surprised if a team bid on Daniel Jones, but I would wait if it was me.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going. Quick couple sleepers here. I wanted to get your kind of a late, kind of in the late areas, 4 to 6. Do you have any guys that kind of stand out to you? I'll give you a few that I had. Obviously, I think Raquel Armstead's kind of an interesting one at Temple University. I like a few others. Obviously, Andrew Wingard, I thought at Wyoming, I saw him play many times, senior player, really kind of one of those. I think he made a comment one time that the only place he would play college football was Wyoming. He's one of those Wyoming kids. He's a guy that I think in the NFL will probably play linebacker, kind of like a Nate Gary type of player. Sutton Smith, obviously, we get a lot of edge rushers, but I thought Sutton Smith was a pretty good player. I kind of got the Carl Nassib feel to me with him. I thought Yodny Kajust, obviously had some injury issues, but he's a guy I have my eye on. Porter Gustin at USC kind of just looks like a linebacker. And I'm going to really throw one at you. I don't know if you don't think I'm going to come at you with this one, but Josh Miles from Morgan State, offensive lineman. Any guys you like there, or any guys you really like from a sleeper perspective?
Oh, yeah, we definitely got Miles in the tackle rankings. I'm trying to leaf through our book right now and get his write-up, because I'm sure we got him in there. He's definitely caught me sleeping on him. I think Kajust would be maybe round 3, maybe 4. That injury is really, I'm not sure if it's a shoulder, but that's prevented him from really being a part of these workouts. I was really hoping to see him on the All-Star train.
If he didn't get injured, do you think he's a first-round pick?
I don't know about first, but I think I've got him in day 2.
Yeah.
I think he's on that tackle list, the short list of whether it be high in round 3. He's a real solid player, just great base strength. Sutton Smith, I had the highest of hopes, and I loved him to death, because I know you're a lot like me, Jeff, watching Mac, paying attention to the teams, and what a game changer he was, no doubt. But he had 2 forgettable reps against Caleb McGarry in Mobile that I think just single-handedly destroyed his stock. McGarry just put him face down in the dirt, and you knew a pass rusher he is not. He's going to have to make it as special teams. The jump up in competition was so evident for him. I felt bad, because I'm there just banging my chest like, Sutton Smith, that's my sleeper. I love, but wow, he really he got his lunch handed to him there in Mobile. But I like Wingard a lot. I just look at what Craig Bull's done and the defenders he puts out. I think that they run pro schemes too. That's what's going to benefit a winger, and he's a willing special teamer. So I think coaching staff going to take a liking to him real fast.
Couple guys, and I'm going to tell you, I do think there's some really good quarterbacks late in this draft. I think there's some guys that'll be decent players. I think Tyree Jackson's a guy that I think he can do something in the NFL. I think he's got the right body type. What do you about Easton Stick? Do you think I actually was kind of interested in maybe the Eagles taking a shot with Easton Stick late in the draft, maybe a 6th-round pick or something? Again, you lose Nick Foles, you still have Nate Sudfeld, but Easton Stick, I think, be interesting. Bring him in with his boy Carson. Any quarterbacks you like late? I'm not a big Kyle Shermer guy. I think Will Greer's interesting. I think he could be. Would it surprise you if Will Greer's the best quarterback out of all these players?
Yeah, that would. I mean, I like Will. He needs to be in the right timing system, but it'd have to be the right fit. The perfect timing, and just honestly a little bit of luck. He struggled mightily in some of those practices in Mobile. It was pretty regrettable. But then again, I mean, I don't know that was the right platform for him. Like I said, he's more of a timing base. He really could use to get in that West Coast system where it's all about quick decisions, finding it early. I think a lot of it's got to be predetermined. That's why he did so well in McElwain's. Anyways, I like Tyree Jackson a lot. I've got him as a top 100 player. I think a team that I think day 2, you've got to think about a guy that is just I've never seen anything like it. Is 6'7", running a 4.59. That is freakish. I mean, considering he's about 250, and the guy is a literal tree. He's real rough around the edges right now, but I would hope there's a QB coach out there that is just pounding the table saying, we've got to get him in the building. We don't need a starter for the next 2 years. Just let me mold him right now. I think Jackson is a guy that he's a big time riser because of, I think offensive player of the game there in the Senior Bowl. He checks the box at the combine. Really good kid off the field in the interviews. I mean, I think really this whole draft process gone very well for Tyree.
How about I got a team for Tyree Jackson. What do you think of the LA Chargers?
Oh yeah, just learn and watch how Philip does it and how he runs the show, how he runs how competitive that guy is. That'd be a great role model. I mean, especially on that last end. I don't know that there's a more competitive person than Rivers. I mean, that guy just doesn't quit. He definitely doesn't quit talking.
Sure. Real quick, a couple guys that I really like also, I think are going to be players in the NFL. Andy Isabella, love him. Was a huge fan of his at UMass. I led the me and my friend Donnie Wright said we led the charge for Andy Isabella. Terrific player, tough kid. I remember one game last year, I bet on it. I had an over with that group, and he had like 20 receptions. He was just unbelievable. And I'm going to throw a name out. I don't think it'll be a great position player in this league, but I think it'll be a great special teams player. Dakota Allen from Texas Tech. I think he's an interesting story. He went through the last chance U stuff. He had some off the field problems. Went back to Texas Tech, became one of the better defensive players in the Big 12. I think he could be a guy that could come in and play special teams. And one other guy, and this is going back to Wyoming. We talked about Wingard. There's a guy named Carl Granderson, plays defensive line for them. I know you know him. Good size. I know he was a basketball player. I remember him playing basketball for the Cowboys at one point. I think he's an interesting character as well. Any other guys that you just must tell us about? Who's going to be your sleeper, Joe Everett?
Well, guys that might not expect to get drafted that you need to hear about. For one, is Colin Sanders, the Western Illinois defensive lineman. He's probably a YouTube sensation or social media. He's the guy doing standing backflips. I think he can do like 10 or 11 in a row at 300 pounds. Just a rare specimen. He's great first step. And if you got a copy of the Senior Bowl game, just watch, I believe, the first quarter. He's got a couple of reps that he just dominates in just to start the whole contest. I think he's in my top 100 player out of Western Illinois. And then Allie Madison, Boise State, the running back. That's just if I was lucky enough to be in a war room, I'd be pounding the table for this kid. I think he's just thick built, wear proportion, nice lower half, and then he's no slouch as a receiver. Just a lot of spring in his jump cuts, tough to tackle, and I think he's available on day 3. I think some teams are going to be sleeping on that guy. Maybe a poor man's version of J.H.I., except he doesn't have the medical red flags. So I like him at 220 plus pounds.
It's interesting you mentioned him. And for anyone that knows me, I was involved with a lot of Boise State games last year. I had a run where I bet on them 4 straight weeks, kind of in some of their Mountain West games. And I was just always a big Brett Rippon guy. I liked what they did out there defensively. But, I mean, Madison single-handedly, won me a game or two. Terrific running back. He had the only concern with him is I don't know if he's kind of that home run hitter. I think he only had like 9 carries of 15-plus yards, something like that. But, yeah, I think that's a kind of an interesting comparison. Maybe Alex Collins, something like that. That's a good one, Joe. I'm glad you brought Madison up. I was a big fan of his out at Boise. Before we let you go and kind of wrap everything up, we have to get to some props, and that's where the money's made in our business here. I kind of want to get with you on just a few. I like over 2.5 Alabama players. I think Jonah Williams is for sure. Obviously, Quinnen Williams is for sure. I think Josh Jacobs is like 24-ish. I know the Philadelphia Eagles are very high on Josh Jacobs. I think Irv Smith could sneak in maybe as well. You have to agree that's a pretty good one, right?
That's on top of my list. So you got my favorite one. It is a little saucy at minus what 220 is.
I got it at 160. I'm quite happy.
Oh,
I bet it about a
I'm
week ago.
jealous. But I like it a lot because Quinnen and Jonah, they're locks. And I agree with you, Josh, somewhere in the 20s. There's just too many teams that could take the shot. If it's Oakland, it's Philly, it could be Indianapolis. I
Sure.
really think he's in there. And who knows about the Thompson, the safety? Irv Smith, probably the next likely. But I three I'm pretty sure on that. So
Three,
I
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I will say this, and I want to make this very clear to anyone out there that doesn't bet props or hasn't bet props. You have to look at props. Most bettors, it's not sexy to lay minus 230. It's not sexy to lay minus 400. But when you go out and talk to a sharp bettor, any sharp bettors, sharp bettors win because they have no issue laying minus 800. They put it at minus 800 because it's likely to happen. They don't want action on it. They're going to limit you. But again, when you're betting draft props, you have to be willing to lay prices. It's kind of like prop bets in the NFL, in the Super Bowl, or again with boxing. I know, with Floyd Mayweather, it's not sexy to lay $450 to win 100, but as many know, it's likely to win all the time. I don't have a problem laying juice. Again, some people do. I don't. And again, if you want to win money betting props, you have to lay juice. It's the one place where I think you do lay it. I think Joey Bosa is the second pick. I think that's pretty, or not Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa. I get it confused. Nick Bosa as the second pick. I think that's pretty foregone at this point. Obviously, other than a trade, which again could happen. But I think John Lynch for very much understands that Nick Bosa is the best pass rusher in this draft. That much be taken at number 2. You have to agree that's a pretty good one as well. Seems likely.
I've been calling him Joey for the last 6 months, so don't worry one bit about it. But no, I like it too. I think Bosa's still on the board. The Niners, if they don't already have a deal going, they're running at that point. So it's very likely.
Yeah, and I actually want to point this out. Not a lot of people know this, but this is from the Big Men on Campus useless knowledge point of the podcast. For anyone that doesn't know, this is quite interesting, actually. Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa, obviously brothers. The father played the NFL for a few years. Their great-grandfather, I don't know if you know this, Joe, was actually Tony Accardo, a big-time mob boss back in the day in Chicago.
Yeah.
He's part of the outfit. They called him Joe Batters or Big Tuna. He's a big-time mob boss. Was pretty much the boss right after Al Capone. He did a lot of things with a guy named Paul Ricca. Definitely an interesting character. A really interesting kind of family life there, which is kind of fascinating. But there's a little-known piece of random mob history. He has kind of interesting bloodlines. So that's one I like. I also think Ed Oliver, and then this may have moved. I got over 6.5 with Ed Oliver. I thought it was a good play. I just don't see him in the top 6. I thought maybe 8 or 9, 7. Maybe it's not going 7. I thought 8, 9 was probably a better indication. Around 10. That's a pretty good one as well. I thought over 6.5 with Ed Oliver.
I wouldn't mind taking that myself, actually. Yeah, I think there's going to be that run on edge rushers. You're going to get that quarterback off the top. Quinnen fits in there, and I honestly believe Devin, if Tampa doesn't take him, they trade out, somebody else takes him. If he's still there, the Giants. I mean, he has to fit somewhere in there. So I think, yeah, I would assume you're very safe at 6.5. That's a good number.
Yeah, I got that one. Kind of pouncing that one quickly. This is an interesting one. Over 2.5 wide receivers. A.J. Brown and Metcalf are likely first-round picks. I think there's some teams that really have a need for a wide receiver. Tennessee, Pittsburgh, obviously, the Giants, Baltimore, New England, Buffalo. I mean, there's a lot of teams that need receivers. I think over 2.5 receivers looks pretty strong as well. You talked about Debo Samuel. You obviously have some others as well that could maybe sneak in. Any thoughts on that one?
That might be a sprinkle for me there. That's tough because I'm just, like I mentioned, this whole wide receiver class there's a guys with a lot of holes. There's not like really a true clean one. I've got first round grades on two guys, Hollywood Brown and Akeem Butler, and then I got a bunch of second rounders. But just as we mentioned, I'm sorry, you all could play a drinking game anytime I'm on, but it only takes one team. That very much applies to this bet. Like you mentioned, there are some teams. Baltimore's going to take one. Pittsburgh's got to be itchy to take one, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens those 20s. But that's one I don't know if I might stay away from. I might even go on the other side. I mean, if I believe it's a class that I don't like, then I'm just, I'll bet blind against the quality of the wide receiver core. So yeah, I'd be reticent to do that one probably.
Couple props you like. What do you got, Joe?
Well, you took my top one. I agree totally. Alabama. I like found this one, I think, on 5 dimes over 5.5 offensive linemen drafted. I think that's a lock. I've got 6 as a lock. With the only potential monkey wrench is, like I mentioned, Jawan Taylor's got a little medical, but even if he doesn't go top 10, he's still going 1. I've got Garrett Bradbury, North Carolina State, Eric McCoy, Texas A&M, Cody Ford, Oklahoma, Jonah Williams, Jawan Taylor, and Andre Dillard. So that makes 6. I've got solid day one grades on all those guys. And then you may see Dalton Risner. I don't know about Greg Little. He may be out of the conversation.
Lindstrom, maybe?
What's that?
Chris Lindstrom, maybe?
See, there you go. Took the words right out of my mouth. I really think 6 is the safest number. And if I can get it at 5.5, I think right now it's 185. It may be a little juicier, but I'm fine with that because I think it can't go any lower than 6. So that's outside of the Alabama one. That's one of my safest props right there. The other one I really like is under 15.5 offensive players in the first round. I found this one at Bet DSI, so it's at like a -172. I think it inflated. I mean, since we've talked, so someone's betting it under as well. I'm looking at the max scenario of 4 quarterbacks. Like I said, 6 offensive linemen, maybe some more, 2 to 3 wide receivers, definitely 2 tight ends, and then that 1 running back. But I think if the team doesn't take the wide receivers, they take the O-lineman. If they don't take the O-lineman, it shifts to wide receivers. And then if you don't get that quarterback, I just don't see. I see max 16, and I'm willing to take the chance that it's much less. It's such a good defensive class. I like under 15.5 offensive players. I think it could be 14 or 15, more close to it.
That's a good one as well. Definitely some great props. I love that offensive lineman one. That's definitely one that I'm going to be getting involved with. Before we go, Joe, who's the one player that falls into this draft in the first round? Is Dwayne Haskins to you?
To me, that's the one. I'm not surprised one bit if it's at the end of the round and you're wondering, wow, I guess there's a reason he didn't decide to go to Nashville and attend the draft, and there's a reason he's at a bowling alley because that's the kind of prospect he's a bowling alley prospect. So I will have to say that probably the most epic faller still has to be Bryce Love. You rewind a year ago this time, we're talking about him in a whole different light. And it's so unfortunate what's happening with him. But I think, predicting what's happening Thursday night, the Ohio State quarterback, I think it's going to be a little later than in round 1 than he had anticipated.
I belittled the kid many times last year for coming back. I didn't understand that thought process at all. Again, he did. Real quick, I'm an Eagles fan. What do you think the Eagles do?
If Josh Jacobs is still there, I like that fit. I still think safety was a sore spot. The McLeod kid, when he wasn't out there, I think that's such a sweet spot there at the end in the late 20s. Juan Thornhill is the guy that's a big time riser. You want to talk about guys that's just checking boxes all day. It's Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver from Ohio State, and Juan Thornhill, the safety from Virginia. Those two could not have had a better draft season, whether it's the All-Star train, the pro day, the combine, you name it. Heck, Terry McLaurin was at Dwayne Haskins pro day looking like he had pads on in that throwing session. But Juan Thornhill, I would recommend folks listening go to the Spark ratings and check the safeties. That number one slot's Juan. It's just insane. He's in the top 99th percentile of NFL athletes at all his test numbers. I think that's that kind of center fielder right now. The Eagles could use in that back half of the defense. They still got a gnarly front seven as far as pass rushers. I think you got to improve that secondary. That's where they can be had in some of these shootouts that go wrong for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously, I think Howie Roseman, I get a feeling they're going to trade up for some reason and go out and get, that really good linebacker or something. Look, I think for a long time, I think they need another linebacker. I don't think this, linebacking group's good enough. Look, I like Grugier Hill and Bradham, but I mean, adding one more linebacker, I think safety you make an interesting point there. I don't know how long. You went out and get Andrew Sendejo, but there's not a lot of depth there. I had Christian Wilkins. I thought that was maybe interesting if he can fall a little bit. I think he'll be there. He could be interesting, but who knows what they're going to do. Look, Joe, it's time that we ride off into the sunset. We've been on for a while. Some great info. I think one of the best draft previews you're going to find. Some great props, some fallers, some risers, a full top 10. We even talked a trade or two. Joe, I'm going to give you an opportunity to plug just one more time, and then we'll wrap everything up.
Oh, yeah. If you want the best draft guide, there's still time to get it before the draft gets here and get your own personal accompaniment for the 2019 NFL Draft. You can go to Draft Bible, NFLDraftBible.com or NFL Draft Scout. Heck, just hit me up on Twitter. I think my very last tweet was retweeting Rick Saratella's tweet about the draft guide. Just tons of scouting reports, information ad nauseum, little sneak preview to next year's class as well. Because if you've listened to this podcast, I think that's I'll leave you with anything that's important. It's to have a perspective of not just what this class looks like, how does it compare to last year? How does it compare to next year? Because that's definitely how those NFL teams are looking. I mean, what's going to be available in the future. So that's definitely we have to include that 2020 preview because for fact, the NFL team you're a fan of, they got that 2020 vision. There's no doubt.
Listen, I don't really promote anything. The handicappers I have on are people that are friends of mine. And look, I just try to provide a good resource and give people good information. But I will say this, for $9.99, I'm not sure that there's a better value on anything out there than this. Go out and get yourself an NFL Draft Bible. Get prepared for next year. Get prepared. Obviously follow Joe on Twitter. A great football resource, knows a ton. And again, once you get the draft Bible, you can read it right away just by getting your downloads in order. So a great piece of value. Go support. I talk about supporting sponsors that we have. Go support the guests. I don't put guests on to really promote anything, but Joe has done a great job with the NFL Draft Bible, all the guys over at NFL Draft Bible. Joe, thanks for coming on, man. Really enjoyed it. The NFL draft is niche. You have guys that like it. They have their teams. But, it's always fun to talk, draft with someone that obviously lives it and breathes it. Good luck with the draft. Thanks for coming on. We'll have to do it again soon.
Oh, my pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. Always great talking ball with you, man.
Thanks, brother. That will wrap it up, guys. Thanks to Joe Everett for coming on. I will include his Twitter in our preview here. As always, if you're new around here, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. And make sure you check out all the videos I have here every day. This has been the Big Man on Campus. This is the NFL Draft Preview. We'll see you next time.